Okay, so we're back recording. This is an exploratory journey into using what's called the EJ Screen Tool, or the Environmental Justice Screening and Mapping Tool. This video is multi-purpose, and so it is relevant to several classes. And in each case, for the class that the video is linked to, there will be more specific instructions of the tasks beyond this orientation that you will be expected to complete. So pay attention to instructions in your learning management system, and also feel free to check with your specific instructor in terms of the way in which this particular product might be relevant to your class. So we're at the EJScreen homepage, and there are a number of different things that one can explore here in terms of environmental justice, and you're perfectly able to have a sniff around on these things, get some technical information, figure out how they developed it, why does EPA have this tool. If you're in a maps and mashups class, the goal here isn't to do a tremendous amount of environmental justice research, but to simply learn about this particular interface as one example of an inquiry-based tool to do interactive mapping. And there may be, for all viewers, there may be examples where particular activities recorded in this video refer back to things that you may have done using other visualization tools in your class. And if that doesn't apply to you, don't worry, just follow along and things will be fine. So first of all, let's launch the tool. I'm not going to spend a ton of time sort of learning to use it by reading. I think we'll spend some time learning to use it by doing. So I'm going to launch the tool, and for those of you who've been working in interactive mapping environments, this will be a mapping environment that's somewhat familiar to you. It's a little stripped down than some interactive mapping applications, and that's a deliberate effort by the EPA and the map designers to have as little or to minimize the amount of information that sort of clutters the screen. I will say this at the outset: this is a very powerful tool, and so we will find things that will appear on the screen, and it will become quite cluttered, but that's part and parcel of the functioning of the interface. And so what I won't be doing is using every single capability, and for more advanced users, you'll find yourself spending a great deal of time with this EJScreen tool. There's a tremendous amount of functionality, including the ability to bring in data layers, mapping layers, and other information from other applications, including from ArcGIS Online, including from Google Earth, and other both GIS and mapping tools. I won't make that the emphasis of my work here, though, and so my goal is to just get you oriented to this in a basic way, and then get you to do some independent work, which will produce, hopefully, some interesting data and some interesting maps. So let's take a trip. Let's take a trip around the product, and we can go from there. And so the standard tool, zoom tool, is here, and the default when you start this map, and I'm not really sure why, but it starts in with a focus of the suburban Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. And if we just sort of pan to the side, and if you use the left mouse key, you can sort of pan around. You can see there's Washington, D.C., and we were in Northern Virginia. You'll notice that as you move around on the screen, your coordinates, the coordinates of your location in decimal degrees, are shown right here at the top. And because this is a spatial interface, the idea of having location data is going to be important throughout this. Again, though, you'll find some things that are familiar in terms of things that you might have already done in interactive mapping. For those of you for whom this is your first exposure, you'll figure it out. Just follow along, and we'll go from there. Zoom tool. So zoom out. You'll get some redrawing. Depending on the speed of your internet connection, that redraw will happen fast or slow. You can see that as we get out of the Washington metro area, we start to see some broader patterns. And again, click the left mouse button or the your mouse pad button, and you can drag around. You can zoom in, and sometimes you'll get a please wait because it's buffering a tremendous amount of data every time you do this. We also can switch base maps, and in this case we're getting the full ArcGIS Online image set as base maps. And if you're making maps here and you're going to be doing screen grabbing or other kinds of exporting, I think my sense is that this is mostly an on-screen product. Let me just get off those base maps for a second. I don't think there are ways from in here to actually do printing. So you will be using screen grab tools. Now, I say there's no way to print the maps, but when you start generating reports, you'll see that you can actually save them, and they are, reusable in terms of the kinds of graphics they produce. So let's just test out so you get a sense of what the base map looked like. This is the ArcGIS Online light gray. Some people like that when they produce maps for publication. This is a topographic map from ArcGIS. This is what's called the streets layer. And those of you who have done other ToxMap work or other online GIS work, you may recognize this streets layer. There's also the National Geographic mapping interface, which has, in some senses, better print. They think more about their print, perhaps. And so if we zoom in on Columbus, you can see the impact of scale-dependent display. And some of these maps are quite nice. We can use imagery, and so we have the ability to get some default imagery from inside of ArcGIS. We're also able to get the Bing Maps aerial photograph layer, and we can get the Bing Maps hybrid layer, which is the Bing Maps layer, but it also has an informational layer with roads and labels and so on. So we've got some choices, and we've also got the a terrain map with labels. So that sort of strips the map down. This reminds me of a map layer by Delorme, and I notice they're credited here. And so this may be one of their contributions to the product. Even though I have a vague feeling that Delorme, the company, the mapping company Delorme, may have in fact been bought by another company quite recently. In any event, also OpenStreetMap, and some of you who might have done some volunteer GIS work may recognize this interface. But let's just go with streets. Now, what are we going to do here? What's the plan? Well, the most important thing is that this is a powerful tool that allows you to do environmental justice and demographic analysis. And I'm going to demonstrate that ability, and then I'm actually going to point to some places that some of you may well be, with which some of you may well be familiar. And so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to click on this report on a selected place, and I want to show you a number of different ways that we are going to specify the location of the selected place on the map. Just moving my chair there. And so we have the standard GIS interface, point, line, polygon, and in this case a drag and drop rectangle. And we could demonstrate each one of these. And so let's put a point on here. And when you put a point on, it generates a little pop-up and it says, what do you want? What do you want from this point? What kind of a report do you want? And we might say, well, I'm interested from this point in a report on a 3-mile buffer around that point. And that might be useful if you were doing, for example, you were looking at a landfill, or you were looking at a contaminated well site, or you were looking at the location of an incinerator that you knew about, or the planned location for an incinerator. And so let's just, model here. Let's just call this I can't spell, incinerator. And I'm actually going to add this point to the map, and there's my buffer. Now I get a chance to do a number of different reports on this site. And so I could get a printable standard report. And so if I click on that, and I'm on my slow internet connection here, so all of this takes time. And what that's doing, Firefox is blocking this, and so I'm going to allow pop-ups. And I've got some kind of error there. Sorry about that. Let me try and just use Control to get this to work. Yes. So this is the regularly in browsers you can use the Control key to avoid a pop-up blocker. And so what it's doing here is it's loading a set of reports, and I'll let it load. And this is the standard report format that you'll see for all of the reports. And so this is, I clicked on that. I think I clicked on Explore Reports. We'll try the standard report again in a second. And so what we have here is we have a set of environmental justice indices. And below here, what's happened is, based on those environmental justice indices, which, by the way, you can look up. And so if I just change the screen for a second, this web page will explain what each of the environmental indices actually consists of. And so there's a traffic indicator, there's a particulate matter indicator, there's a diesel particulate matter indicator. And what we have across here is this is comparing the exposure of people in that buffer around that incinerator to the national exposure. And so, and I chose this location quite randomly. So in terms of percentile, it means that people are in the 82nd percentile in this buffer of proximity to traffic. Now we can also get a state percentile, we can also get a regional percentile, and we can switch the USA off, and we can simplify the chart by saying, I'm not going to look at traffic proximity, I'm not going to look at ozone, I'm not going to look at lead paint, I'm not going to look at toxic discharges, I'm not going to look at proximity to Superfund sites. And so we can simplify this in any way that we would like. There are a set of environmental indicators, right? So they're not the environmental justice indicators, they're the environmental indicators. There are also a set of demographic indicators, and there's an overall demographic index. And I don't have time in this video to look up all of these, but you can see that they're environmental justice related demographic indicators. Minority populations, low income, which means less than twice the poverty level, linguistically isolated, less than a high school education, lots of children. And we again can put on the state and we can put on a regional percentile. And that gives us a way to explore reports. Now, let's try that printable standard and see if I can get that to go. And if I can't get it to go, I think I might go out of Firefox, get in Chrome, and try it in a different browser. But if I hold the control key and click on Get Printable Report, let's see if it will run. It's giving us a wait. And yeah, so what happens when you do a printable report, it's a 3-mile ring centered at that pair of coordinates. It's in Ohio. It's in EPA Region 5. The approximate population of that ring is 90,000 people. It's an incinerator. It's not really an incinerator. I just put that on there. And then it's giving you a set of diagrams and maps and all of the information that we would have gotten from that other report. And so I'm going to just close that. I'm actually going to close those two error screens as well. And we can get a couple of demographic reports from the 2000 census, from the 2010 census, and from the 2008 through 2012 American Community Survey report. And those of you who are familiar with census methodologies will know that the American Community Survey report is an annual sample using census-driven questions to a sample of the population on an intercensal basis. And we get a lot more of detailed information from the ACS reports. And so again, I'm going to use the control key to work around that pop-up, and I'm going to click on it with control, and we should get a pre-made report. You have to understand here, because we made that ring around the fake incinerator, what the program's having to do is it's having to gather the information from this query based on, I think it's census blocks that they use. And so now we have an EJScreen ACS summary report. And what we have is the kinds of information that are quite useful. Again, its estimated population is 90,000. It's got a population density. It's got a percentage of minority population. It's 42%. So just me randomly picking this area, it's quite a high level minority population. If we scroll down, we get some indicators of identity. So we get some race, we get an estimate of Hispanic populations, we get an age distribution. If we scroll down, we get some educational information, we get some language information, we get a distribution of income in terms of household income, and we could use this data to make some kind of histogram for the area. But I think you get the idea. I'm going to close this up and go back to the map. I think you get the idea here that what's happening inside of the GIS is that we're seeing an inquiry-based, a query-based development of both environmental and demographic and environmental justice data. And that's pretty cool to be able to do on the fly. Now, I'm going to close this up, and it's going to leave this on here. We can just erase it off, and that's actually gone, and we've lost those reports. It's all done on the fly. If you want to save things, if you want to print things, you have to do those while the reports are alive. And you can leave multiple places on the map. If you want to work in a similar area, as I'm going to do, it's probably a good idea to just erase them off. Now, I'm going to do a selected place again. And if we wanted to do the same inquiry about the populations along a key road or a pipeline or an electrical corridor, we could use the line tool or path tool to set ourselves a path. I'm going to double click it, and now it's going to say how much of a buffer do you want. And so I'm going to call this interstate, and I'm going to say I want a 2-mile buffer, and I'm going to add it to the map so you can see it appear. And so it's done a 2-mile buffer around the line, and you see the buffer is kind of an irregular shape because the line was sort of a line and then it went off in a different direction. And then it's curved off here because it's taking a radius. And again, for other examples, I won't do the explore reports, but just so you get the idea, maybe we'll just get the printable standard report. I'm going to hold control. I'm going to click on that. It's working. It's clearly in Firefox. There's some aggravation here, but I got it working by working around it. And so you can see here that we get the information. The air toxics, cancer risk, and some other indicators are not available, and I don't know why. But what we have here is we have our map, we have some environmental indicators, and that's for a custom created line with a 2-mile buffer. And so that's pretty impressive that the EJScreen can make those so quickly. It's very well coded. If we get rid of this, we just erase it. You got the idea. We could make a polygon around. I could approximate this to a particular neighborhood, and I'm clicking as I go along. And then I double click, it's ready, and I don't need a buffer for this. And so I'm just going to explore reports, and here's the EJ indexes, the environmental indicators, the demographic indicators, and that could be for a neighbor, for a neighborhood that you designed that you were interested in terms of its environmental justice populations. For students who have had some experience with the environmental justice tools in the state of Massachusetts interactive mapping utility called Oliver, this EJScreen makes a great comparative tool to that. And you might find yourself, as part of the assignment for this, actually going to the landfill that you specified in your earlier map and figuring out some kind of environmental justice report. And I'll think that through, and you check the learning management system for that. So these are sort of graphic views. We can click on this and we will get, if I move that out of the way, we will get the information in a tabular form if we wanted to work with a table rather than with graphics. And we can, I think, if I click here, I think it opens the table in Microsoft Excel. And there we go. And so you could operate on this in some way. I'm going to actually close Excel. I don't want to use it for this. I'm going to close the table. I'm going to close up that Explore Reports. I'm going to close that. And I'm actually going to erase my neighborhood. And I'm going to do one other thing. I'm just going to show you one other thing on this. And then you could try the rest for yourself. If I click on Report on a selected place, I can go for a predetermined location or a latitude, longitude. And so I could tell a place and it would take us there. I think it takes us there and then it will give us those options. And so, for example, if we went to Nitro, West Virginia, which I know has some significant pollution problems, and I click go, it's actually going to take us to Nitro, and it's going to give us the option of generating exactly those same reports. I'm not going to do it this time, and I'm going to do the other choices. If I click on the map to select a census block group, I can click on if I just click on Scott Depot, it will provide the census block group in which that click that I made actually occurs. And that's very useful if you know of a facility, or you can search by address, but if you just know something geographically, it's actually quite useful to be able to go to the area and just click on it and get an environmental justice and an environmental report for a particular block group in the census. So I'm going to erase that. I could do the same thing. I'm going to just, let's see. I'll just close that up for a second, and I'm going to zoom in here. I'm just going to zoom in, and I need to move around. So I need to get us focused on this area. And I'm right in this, I want to be right in this area. And this is an area that I know from other work. And this is, I'm actually going to change the base map and see if it will give us a better place label for it. This is actually, if I've got this correct, this is actually Institute, Ohio. Yeah, there we go. And Institute, Ohio is kind of well known because it is a community in which Union Carbide operates a pesticide plant. And the plant in Institute is the same design as the plant in Bhopal, India, that leaked and failed and poisoned tens of thousands of people. And so this is Institute, West Virginia, rather. And I'm actually going to go and click on the map to get a block group. And I know the plant is somewhere in here. I'm not exactly sure. And I'm just going to click on this to get a block group. And just as a matter of interest, I'm going to explore the report for that area. And I'm going to see for the demographics what it looks like compared to the United States and the state of West Virginia. And again, here we have the percentile. And so what this means is that if we sorted all of the block groups for the United States and we looked at in the minority population that this block group in in West Virginia, which has a population of about 1,000 people, is in the 75th percentile. Now, if we look at it in terms of the state percentile, you can see that it's in the 99th percentile for West Virginia. And so this is one of, in quotes, the most minority dominated areas. In terms of income, we're going to be looking at this in reverse, right? So if we sorted income, we know that nationally, in terms of low income, this is the population percentile for low income. This block group is in the 51st percentile. In terms of West Virginia, it's in the 33rd percentile. So compared to other block groups in West Virginia, it isn't as much of a low income area. And I just think that when we think about these kinds of things, getting a sense of comparisons is really quite useful. And this tool allows you to do it comparing at 3 different spatial scales: the regional scale, the state scale, and in terms of a national scale. In terms of environmental indicators, we're looking at kinds of pollution indicators and proximity indicators that put this area in high percentiles in terms of water discharge proximity, in terms of toxic storage and disposal facilities. So this is an area, this block group is an area that faces some environmental challenges. And in terms of the environmental justice indicators, most of which I switched off before, so let me switch some of them back on, you get a sense of how, of what kinds of percentiles this place is in. So, good information and an easy way to get that kind of information quickly, and I think it's a very useful tool. And I'm actually going to stop this video here and continue on in a separate video so that the size of the video isn't an extreme size. So back in a bit.